Before we begin the story, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and enjoy the story. The steam rose like morning mist as Charlotte Williams stepped into the luxury spa's main corridor, her tablet clutched tightly against her chest. The Grandview Resort's Wellness Center was her latest project, and today's final walkthrough would determine whether her interior design firm landed the biggest contract of her career. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across Italian marble floors, while floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked snow-capped mountains. Everything had to be perfect. Charlotte adjusted her navy blazer and smoothed her auburn hair, checking her reflection in the polished surface of a decorative vase. At 28, she'd built her reputation on transforming ordinary spaces into extraordinary experiences. But this project could change everything. The Grandview's owner had hinted at expanding to 5 more locations if she impressed him today. Her heels clicked rhythmically as she made her way toward the sauna complex, reviewing her notes one final time. The traditional Finnish sauna had been completely redesigned, with her signature blend of rustic elegance and modern luxury. Cedar walls glowed under soft LED lighting, while hand-carved benches invited relaxation. The temperature control system was state-of-the-art, and the sound system played gentle nature sounds. "Miss Williams," a maintenance worker appeared beside her, tool belt jangling. "We're testing the new locking mechanism on the sauna door. Should be finished in about an hour." Charlotte nodded absently, still focused on her checklist. She wanted to experience the space from a client's perspective, to feel the ambiance she'd carefully crafted. The thermometer outside the door read a perfect 170 degrees Fahrenheit. She pushed open the heavy cedar door and stepped inside, immediately enveloped by dry, therapeutic heat. The lighting was perfect, casting a warm, golden glow that made the wood grain appear to dance. She sat on the middle bench, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. This was exactly what luxury should feel like. The door's soft click barely registered in her mind as she lost herself in the sensory experience. The heat penetrated her blazer, making her realize she was ridiculously overdressed for a sauna inspection. She'd planned to stay only a few minutes, just long enough to ensure everything functioned properly. A sharp rattle made her eyes snap open. She turned toward the door and pulled the handle. Nothing. She tried again, putting her full weight behind it. The door remained firmly shut. "Hello," she called out, her voice echoing off the cedar walls. "I'm locked in here." Silence greeted her, except for the gentle hum of the heating system. Charlotte's heart rate quickened as she realized the maintenance worker had probably activated the new locking system while she was inside. Her phone showed no signal in the insulated space. The heat was becoming more noticeable now, making her blazer feel like a wool blanket in summer. She slipped it off, revealing a silk blouse that immediately began to cling uncomfortably to her skin. This was not how she'd imagined her crucial presentation day going. A loud thud from outside made her rush to the door again. "Help! Someone's locked in here!" "What the hell?" A deep male voice responded from the other side. "Thank God," Charlotte breathed. "Can you get me out? The door's locked." "Join the club. I'm stuck too." Charlotte's stomach dropped. "You're locked in?" "Apparently. What kind of genius designed a sauna that locks people inside?" Heat flooded Charlotte's cheeks, and not from the temperature. "I did." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft whoosh of the ventilation system. Charlotte pressed her forehead against the warm door, mortified. Of all the ways to meet a potential client, this wasn't exactly professional. "You're the interior designer?" The voice sounded amused now. "Charlotte Williams. And you are?" "Alexander Sterling. I own this place." Charlotte's eyes widened. Alexander Sterling, the billionaire resort mogul whose approval could make or break her career. She was locked in a sauna with her most important client, sweating through her carefully chosen professional attire. Mr. Sterling, I can explain. This wasn't supposed to happen. The locking mechanism is new, and I had no idea. Relax, Charlotte. May I call you Charlotte? His voice was closer now, like he was sitting right against the door. Despite the circumstances, something about his calm tone made her shoulders relax slightly. Of course. I'm so sorry about this. Your maintenance team was testing the locks, and I just wanted to experience the space from a guest perspective. And now we're both experiencing it whether we want to or not. She could hear the smile in his voice. How hot does this thing get? Charlotte glanced at the temperature gauge on the wall. It's set to 170 degrees, perfectly safe for extended periods, with proper hydration and clothing. She looked down at her wool skirt and silk blouse, neither of which I currently have. A low chuckle came from the other side. I'm not exactly dressed for this either. I was coming from a board meeting. The irony of the situation began to dawn on Charlotte. She'd spent months perfecting this sauna's design, ensuring every detail promoted relaxation and wellness. Now she was trapped inside it with the one person whose opinion mattered most, slowly melting in business attire. So, Alexander said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. Since we're going to be here for a while, want to tell me about your design philosophy? Charlotte laughed despite herself. You mean besides apparently locking clients inside their amenities? Especially that part. She settled, back against the door, accepting their unusual circumstances. If she was going to be stuck, she might as well make the best of it. At least Alexander Sterling seemed to have a sense of humor about the situation. The heat continued to build around them, and Charlotte realized this was going to be unlike any client meeting she'd ever had. Charlotte wiped perspiration from her forehead, grateful that at least the lighting in her sauna design was flattering. Through the cedar walls, she could hear Alexander moving around, in what she assumed was the adjacent changing area. So, Charlotte, his voice carried through the wood, tell me what inspired this particular torture chamber. She couldn't help but laugh. Torture chamber. I prefer therapeutic wellness experience. Right now it feels more like being slowly cooked. Charlotte slipped off her heels, the cool cedar floor a relief against her feet. Traditional Finnish saunas are about purification and renewal. I wanted to create a space that felt both ancient and modern. The cedar is from sustainable forests in Finland, and the LED lighting system mimics the natural progression of sunrise. Impressive, though I'm guessing you tested it wearing appropriate attire. Usually, yes. Charlotte tugged at her silk blouse, which was now completely damp. This is definitely a first for me. What's your usual testing process? Alexander's voice sounded genuinely curious. Do you personally experience every space you design? Absolutely. How can I recommend something to clients if I haven't lived it myself? Charlotte leaned back against the wall, the warm cedar surprisingly comfortable. I've slept in every bedroom I've designed, cooked in every kitchen, soaked in every bathtub. Dedicated to your craft. It's the only way to ensure authenticity. Take this sauna, for example. The bench height is specifically calculated for optimal heat distribution. The ventilation ensures you never feel claustrophobic, and the acoustics are designed so conversations feel intimate without echoing. Is that why I feel like you're sitting right next to me instead of behind a wall? Charlotte's cheeks warmed beyond what the temperature could account for. His voice did sound incredibly close, like he was whispering directly in her ear. That was intentional. I wanted to create connection, even in solitude. Mission accomplished. The way he said it made Charlotte's pulse quicken. She reminded herself this was still a business meeting, even under bizarre circumstances. What drew you to the hospitality industry, Mr. Sterling? Alexander, please. And it started with my grandfather's fishing lodge in Montana. Tiny place, 8 cabins, but every guest left feeling like family. When he passed, I inherited it, and realized I wanted to recreate that feeling on a larger scale. Charlotte detected genuine warmth in his voice. That's beautiful. Most people assume luxury. Hospitality is about impressing guests, not connecting with them. Exactly. Anyone can buy expensive furniture and call it luxury. Real luxury is making someone feel understood, cared for. It's about creating experiences they'll remember forever. That's why I love working with you. The words slipped out before Charlotte could stop them. She cringed at how unprofessional that sounded. Oh, and here I thought you were just in it for my ruggedly handsome good looks. Charlotte burst out laughing. I wouldn't know. I haven't actually seen you yet. Right. We're having our entire first meeting through a wall while slowly dehydrating. This definitely wasn't in my business school textbook. Mine either. Charlotte was surprised by how easy Alexander was to talk to. She'd expected the billionaire resort owner to be intimidating, cold, strictly business. Instead, he seemed genuinely interested in her work and remarkably good-humored about their predicament. The temperature gauge now read 175 degrees. Charlotte's clothing was completely soaked, and she could feel sweat beading on her forehead. Alexander, we should probably try to get out soon. This temperature isn't dangerous, but it's not comfortable either. Agreed. Any ideas? Charlotte examined the door mechanism from the inside. The lock engages electronically, but there should be an emergency release. Let me think about where we would have installed it. She ran her hands along the door frame, searching for the manual override she was certain they'd included in the design. Her fingers found a small panel near the floor, almost invisible in the soft lighting. Found something. She knelt and pried open the panel with her fingernail. Inside was a simple mechanical switch. There's an emergency release, but it looks like it needs to be activated from both sides simultaneously. Both sides? You should have an identical panel in the changing area. We designed it as a safety feature so people couldn't accidentally trigger it. But two people working together can override the electronic lock. Brilliant. Give me a second to find it. Charlotte heard him moving around, presumably searching for the matching panel. She remained crouched by the door, her finger poised over the switch. Got it, Alexander called. On 3? Perfect. 1, 2, 3. Charlotte pressed her switch and heard a satisfying click as the electronic lock disengaged. She pushed the door handle and nearly cried with relief as it opened. Cool air rushed into the sauna, hitting her overheated skin like a blessing. She stepped into the changing area and immediately froze. Alexander Sterling stood before her, and her first thought was that the business magazines had vastly underestimated his appeal. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair slightly mussed from running his hands through it, and gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar and damp with perspiration, clinging to what was obviously an impressively fit physique. But it was his expression that stopped her breath. He was staring at her, with a mixture of surprise and something else entirely. His gaze traveled from her damp hair to her silk blouse, which she suddenly realized was practically transparent from the heat and moisture. "Oh, God," Charlotte whispered, crossing her arms over her chest. Alexander immediately turned away, his voice strained. "I'm sorry. I should have warned you. No, I should have thought—" Charlotte looked around desperately for something to cover herself with. Alexander shrugged out of his suit jacket without turning around and held it out behind him. "Here." Charlotte gratefully took the jacket and slipped it on. The fabric smelled like expensive cologne and something uniquely masculine. "Thank you. You can turn around now." When he faced her again, his cheeks were slightly flushed and not entirely from the heat. "Are you okay? You look like you might be overheated." Charlotte realized she was swaying slightly on her feet. The combination of high temperature, stress, and embarrassment was making her lightheaded. "I think I need to sit down." Alexander immediately guided her to a nearby bench, his hand steady on her elbow. Put your head between your knees. I'll get you some water." As Charlotte followed his instructions, she couldn't help but think that this was definitely not how she'd imagined meeting Alexander Sterling. But despite the circumstances, something told her it was the beginning of something much more interesting than a simple business relationship. Alexander returned with a bottle of ice-cold water, his movements quick and efficient. "Drink this slowly," he instructed, settling beside Charlotte on the bench, but maintaining a respectful distance. Charlotte accepted the water gratefully, the cool liquid immediately soothing her parched throat. "I can't believe I nearly passed out during the most important meeting of my career." "Hey, heat exhaustion happens to everyone. I once fainted during a presentation to a room full of investors in Singapore. 105 degrees, no air conditioning, and I was wearing a three-piece wool suit." Alexander's eyes crinkled with amusement. "At least you have a good excuse. You're just saying that to make me feel better." "I'm really not. Ask my assistant, Jennifer. She still brings it up whenever I complain about being hot." Charlotte found herself smiling despite her mortification. "Thank you. For the water, the jacket, and for not firing me immediately." "Fire you? Charlotte, you just spent 20 minutes locked in a sauna wearing business attire and still managed to explain your design philosophy better than most people do in boardrooms. If anything, I'm impressed." The sincerity in his voice made Charlotte's heart skip. She studied his profile as he gazed toward the windows overlooking the mountain view. Strong jaw, laugh lines around his eyes, and an unexpected gentleness in his expression. "Besides," Alexander continued, turning back to her, "anyone dedicated enough to personally test every aspect of their designs clearly cares about their work. That's exactly the kind of person I want on my team." "Does that mean I got the job?" Alexander's smile was warm and genuine. "You got the job the moment I walked through the lobby and saw what you'd done with the space. The sauna incident was just memorable confirmation." Relief flooded through Charlotte, followed quickly by a flutter of something else as Alexander's gray eyes met hers. "I promise my future site visits will involve more appropriate attire. I don't know. This look has a certain charm." Charlotte glanced down at herself, swimming in Alexander's expensive jacket over her damp skirt, barefoot with her hair escaping its professional bun. "I look like I got caught in a rainstorm." "You look beautiful." The words hung between them, honest and unexpected. Charlotte felt her cheeks warm again, but this time it had nothing to do with the temperature. She began, but Alexander's phone buzzed loudly, breaking the moment. He glanced at the screen and sighed. "My assistant. She's probably wondering where I am." He answered the call. "Jennifer, I'm fine. Just had an unexpected delay with the interior designer." "No, everything's good. Yes, I'll be there soon." Charlotte used the interruption to gather herself, smoothing her damp hair and trying to look more professional. The spell of intimacy was broken, and she reminded herself that Alexander was her client, a very important, very attractive client, but still someone she needed to maintain professional boundaries with. "Sorry about that," Alexander said, ending the call. "I have a conference call with the Tokyo investors in 30 minutes, but I'd like to continue this conversation. Are you free for dinner tonight?" Charlotte's pulse quickened. "Dinner?" "To discuss the expansion project. 5 additional resorts, remember?" His expression was carefully neutral, but there was something in his eyes that suggested the conversation might cover more than just business. "Of course, business dinner." Charlotte stood, immediately missing the warmth of the bench and Alexander's proximity. "What time?" 7. There's a restaurant called Altitude on the top floor. Best view in the city." "I know it. Very romantic." Charlotte caught herself. "I mean, very nice atmosphere for business discussions." Alexander's smile turned knowing. "Yes, very businesslike." They walked toward the spa's exit together, their footsteps echoing in the marble corridor. Charlotte was acutely aware of Alexander's presence beside her, the way he unconsciously matched his longer stride to hers, the subtle scent of his cologne on the jacket she still wore. "I should return this," she said, starting to shrug out of his jacket. "Keep it for now. You can give it back tonight." "Won't you need it? For your conference call?" Alexander gestured toward his damp shirt. "I think I need to change anyway. Besides, it looks better on you than it ever did on me." They reached the spa's main entrance, where late afternoon sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. In the natural light, Charlotte could see the full impact of their sauna adventure. Alexander's dark hair was still slightly damp, curling at the edges, and his shirt clung to his chest in a way that made her mouth go dry. 7 o'clock, Alexander confirmed, his hand briefly touching her elbow in a gesture that sent electricity up her arm. 7 o'clock, Charlotte repeated, watching as he walked toward the elevators. She stood there for a long moment after the elevator doors closed, his jacket wrapped around her like a warm embrace. This morning she'd been nervous about impressing a potential client. Now she was nervous about something entirely different. Charlotte's phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Maya. How did the big presentation go? Charlotte stared at the message, trying to figure out how to explain. "Got locked in a sauna with the billionaire client. Have dinner date tonight. Send help." Maya's response was immediate. "What?" "Details. Now." But Charlotte was already heading toward her car, her mind racing with everything that had just happened. She had 6 hours to figure out what to wear to a business dinner that didn't feel remotely like business, with a man who made her forget how to breathe properly. As she drove home, Alexander's jacket still around her shoulders, Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a completely unexpected turn. The question was whether she was brave enough to see where it led. The city skyline spread out before her as she navigated through traffic. And for the first time in months, Charlotte felt like anything was possible. Getting locked in that sauna might have been the best accident of her entire career. Charlotte stood in front of her closet in complete panic, having tried on and rejected 8 different outfits. Business professional felt too formal after their intimate sauna encounter, but anything too casual might send the wrong message. She held up a burgundy wrap dress and studied herself in the mirror. "It's just a business dinner," she told her reflection firmly. "A business dinner with a gorgeous billionaire who called you beautiful and looked at you like you were the most fascinating woman he'd ever met." Her phone rang, and Maya's face filled the screen via video call. "Okay, I need the full story. Start from the beginning and don't leave out any details." Charlotte propped the phone against her dresser and continued getting ready. "There's not much to tell. I got locked in the sauna I designed. He got locked in the changing area. We talked through the wall for 20 minutes, and now we're having dinner." "Liar. I can see you glowing through the phone. What aren't you telling me?" Charlotte applied lipstick, trying to appear casual. "He's not what I expected. Smart, funny, down to earth. When I nearly fainted from the heat, he took care of me. And nothing. He's my client, Maya. This is professional." Maya's laugh filled the room. "Honey, no business dinner requires that much lip gloss. You like him." Charlotte did like him, more than she should, considering they'd known each other for exactly 3 hours. But there had been something in the way Alexander looked at her, a connection that felt deeper than circumstances should have allowed. "It doesn't matter what I feel," Charlotte said, slipping into the burgundy dress. "I can't afford to complicate the biggest contract of my career. Or maybe this contract is about to become the best thing that ever happened to you." An hour later, Charlotte stood outside Altitude, her palms sweating despite the cool evening air. The restaurant occupied the top 3 floors of the Sterling Tower, offering panoramic views of the city lights below. She'd eaten here twice before for special occasions, but never with a date. Not a date, she corrected herself. A business dinner. The maitre d' recognized her immediately. "Miss Williams, Mr. Sterling is waiting for you in the private dining room." Charlotte's heart hammered as she followed him through the restaurant's elegant main floor, past tables of well-dressed diners, toward a secluded room with floor-to-ceiling windows. Alexander stood with his back to the door, looking out at the twinkling cityscape, and Charlotte's breath caught. He'd changed into a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly, his dark hair still slightly tousled from their earlier adventure. When he turned to greet her, his smile was warm and genuine, immediately putting her at ease. "You clean up well," he said, his eyes taking in her appearance with obvious appreciation. "So do you. Much better than the sweaty businessman I met this afternoon." Alexander laughed, pulling out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy. "I was hoping you'd forget about that part." "Are you kidding? That's the most interesting client meeting I've ever had." Their table overlooked the mountains in the distance, where snow-capped peaks caught the last light of sunset. A bottle of wine already waited, along with appetizers that looked like small works of art. "I took the liberty of ordering," Alexander said, settling across from her. "The chef is a friend, and I thought you might enjoy the tasting menu." "Perfect. I'm too nervous to make decisions anyway." "Nervous? About dinner?" Charlotte sipped her wine, the rich burgundy warming her from the inside. "About everything. This morning I was worried about impressing you professionally. Now I'm sitting in the most romantic restaurant in the city, wearing your jacket over my dress, wondering what we're really doing here." Alexander's expression grew serious. "What do you think we're doing here?" "I honestly don't know." "Good. That makes two of us." The honesty in his voice surprised her. "You don't know either." "Charlotte, I've been in business for 15 years. I've had thousands of meetings, hundreds of dinners with contractors and designers. None of them ever made me forget how to form complete sentences." "I made you forget how to form sentences." "When you walked out of that sauna, looking like some kind of beautiful disaster, completely flustered and trying to maintain your dignity while drowning in my jacket." Alexander leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. "I forgot how to breathe, let alone speak." Charlotte felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It was pretty mortifying from my perspective. It was the most real moment I've had with another person in years." Their eyes met across the table, and Charlotte felt that same electric connection from the spa. This was dangerous territory, but she couldn't bring herself to care. "Tell me something," Alexander said, his voice softer now. "Besides design, what makes you happy?" "That's a loaded question. I'm full of those?" Charlotte considered his question seriously. "Thunderstorms, good books, finding the perfect piece for a room at an antique market, Sunday mornings with nowhere to be." She paused. "Your turn." "Sunrise from my ranch in Montana. My nephew's terrible knock-knock jokes. The moment when a space comes together exactly as envisioned." He smiled, and apparently, getting locked in saunas with beautiful interior designers. "That's very specific. I'm discovering I have very specific tastes." The waiter appeared with their first course, giving Charlotte a moment to compose herself. She was falling for Alexander Sterling, and falling hard. Everything about him drew her in. His unexpected humor, his genuine interest in her work, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. "Can I ask you something?" Charlotte said as they began eating. "Anything. Why aren't you married? Someone like you, successful, charming, ridiculously handsome. I'm surprised some smart woman hasn't snapped you up." Alexander's expression clouded slightly. "There was someone. Sarah. We were engaged for 2 years. What happened? She wanted the lifestyle my money could provide, not necessarily me. When I suggested postponing the wedding to spend more time together, really get to know each other, she called it off. He met Charlotte's eyes. Best decision she ever made, though she didn't know it at the time. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me the difference between someone who loves what you can give them and someone who loves who you are. Charlotte set down her fork, suddenly nervous. And you think you can tell the difference now? With you? Absolutely. Alexander reached across the table and covered her hand with his. You spent 20 minutes locked in a sauna with me, thinking I was maintenance staff, and never once asked what I did for a living or how much money I made. You just talked to me like I was human. You are human. Most people forget that part. His thumb traced across her knuckles, sending shivers up her arm. Charlotte knew she should pull away, maintain professional boundaries, but she couldn't bring herself to break the connection. Alexander, she began, but he shook his head. I know this is complicated. You're working for me, and I don't want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable, but I also can't pretend I don't feel something here. What do you feel? Like I've been waiting my whole life for someone to get locked in a sauna with. Charlotte laughed despite the butterflies in her stomach. That's definitely the most unique pickup line I've ever heard. Did it work? Looking into his eyes, seeing the hope and vulnerability there, Charlotte realized she was already lost. Yeah, it worked. The rest of dinner passed in a haze of laughter and increasingly intimate conversation. Alexander told her about his grandfather's fishing lodge, painting vivid pictures of mountain mornings, and the elderly man who'd taught him that true luxury was making people feel at home. Charlotte shared stories about her childhood, following her architect father around construction sites and falling in love with the way spaces could transform people's lives. So, interior design was inevitable? Alexander asked, as they shared a decadent chocolate dessert. Dad says I was rearranging furniture before I could walk properly. Mom would put me down for a nap, and I'd wake up having somehow moved all my stuffed animals into new configurations. A born designer. What about you? Was business always the plan? Alexander's expression grew thoughtful. Actually, I wanted to be a teacher. Elementary school. I loved the idea of shaping young minds, helping kids discover what they were passionate about. What changed? Reality. My father had other plans. Sterling Industries needed an heir, and I was it. His voice carried a hint of old sadness. Don't get me wrong. I've found fulfillment in hospitality, creating experiences for people, building something lasting. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd followed my first instinct. Charlotte heard the wistfulness in his voice and understood. It's not too late, you know. You could still teach. A billionaire resort owner walking into an elementary school? I'd terrify the kids. You didn't terrify me. You're not 7 years old. No, but I was pretty intimidated by the idea of meeting the great Alexander Sterling this morning. Then I got to know the real you, and that fear disappeared completely. Alexander reached for her hand again, his touch sending familiar sparks through her system. The real me, huh? Most people find him pretty boring. Most people are idiots. The restaurant had nearly emptied around them, but neither seemed inclined to leave. They'd moved past business hours ago, deep into the territory of two people genuinely fascinated by each other. Can I confess something? Charlotte said, emboldened by wine and the intimacy of the moment. Please do. I researched you before our meeting, read every article, every interview. I thought I knew exactly who you were. And who did you think I was? Cold, calculating, all business, no heart. The articles made you sound like some kind of corporate robot. Charlotte shook her head. They got everything wrong. They write what sells magazines. Ruthless billionaire gets more clicks than guy who actually cares about his employees. Have you ever thought about changing that narrative? How would you suggest I do that? Charlotte's mind was already spinning with possibilities. Let people see the real you. The man who remembers his grandfather's fishing lodge, who wanted to teach children, who helps overheated designers and makes them feel safe. You think people would be interested in that story? I think people are starving for authenticity. Everyone's so tired of manufactured perfection. Charlotte leaned forward, excited by the idea. What if your hotels reflected that? Real experiences, genuine connections, stories that matter. Alexander's eyes lit up with interest. Go on. Instead of just luxury for luxury's sake, what if each property had a heart? A story connected to the place, the people, the culture. Like your grandfather's lodge, but elevated. You're talking about completely reimagining the Sterling brand. I'm talking about showing the world who Alexander Sterling really is. They stared at each other across the table, and Charlotte realized she'd just proposed the project of a lifetime. Not just designing interiors, but creating a complete brand experience that reflected Alexander's true vision. That would be enormous, Alexander said slowly. It would require redesigning every property, retraining staff, completely changing our marketing approach. It would be incredible. It would also mean working together for at least 2 years, traveling to every property, spending countless hours planning and implementing. His gray eyes searched her face. Would you be interested in something like that? Charlotte's heart hammered. 2 years working closely with Alexander, traveling together, building something meaningful. It was everything she'd dreamed of professionally, and everything that terrified her personally. That would depend, she said carefully. On what? On whether we can figure out how to work together without. She gestured between them. Without this. Yes. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his thumb still tracing patterns on her hand. What if we don't want to ignore this? Alexander, I know it's complicated. I know it's not smart business practice. But I can't sit here and pretend I don't care about you. Charlotte's breath caught. We've known each other for 1 day. Sometimes 1 day is enough. The weight of his words settled between them. Charlotte knew he was right. She'd felt the connection from their first conversation through the sauna wall. But she also knew the risks. If this goes wrong, she said quietly, I lose everything. This contract, my reputation, my career. And if it goes right? Charlotte met his eyes, seeing her own hopes and fears reflected there. If it goes right, it changes everything. Alexander lifted their joined hands and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. I would never do anything to hurt your career, Charlotte. If you want to keep this strictly professional, I'll respect that. But I had to tell you how I feel. Charlotte's heart ached with wanting and fear in equal measure. She thought about her conversation with Maya, about playing it safe versus taking the risk of a lifetime. What are you proposing exactly? She asked. Dinner tomorrow night, just the 2 of us. No business discussion. A real date where we figure out if this is as real as it feels. And if it is, then we take it 1 day at a time and see where it leads. Charlotte looked out at the city lights below, thinking about all the careful plans she'd made for her life and career. None of them had included falling for a client, especially not on the same day she met him. But sometimes, the best things in life weren't planned. 1 dinner, she said finally, to see if this is real. Alexander's smile was brilliant. 1 dinner. And if we decide to pursue this, we establish very clear boundaries about business and personal. Absolutely. And no matter what happens between us personally, the professional relationship remains intact. You have my word. Charlotte nodded, her decision made. Then yes, I'd like to have dinner with you tomorrow night. Alexander's joy was unmistakable, and Charlotte felt an answering warmth spread through her chest. This was either the smartest decision she'd ever made, or the most beautifully stupid one. Either way, she couldn't wait to find out which. Charlotte spent the next morning in her studio, sketching designs for the expanded Sterling project, while trying not to think about her dinner with Alexander. She'd barely slept, replaying every moment of their evening together, analyzing every word and gesture for hidden meaning. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Good morning. Hope you slept better than I did." Charlotte smiled despite her nerves and typed back, "Barely slept at all." "Good. Misery loves company. Coffee this afternoon? I have something to show you." Charlotte hesitated. They'd agreed to keep business and personal separate, but she was curious about what he wanted to show her. Business or personal? Technically business, but also an excuse to see you before tonight. Honest. I like that. Where? My office. 3 p.m.? Charlotte arrived at Sterling Tower 15 minutes early, using the extra time to calm her nerves in the marble lobby. Alexander's corporate headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of the building, and everything about it screamed success and power. His assistant, Jennifer, greeted her warmly. "Mr. Sterling is waiting for you in his office. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Jennifer led her down a hallway, lined with photographs of Sterling properties around the world. Each image showed stunning architecture and beautiful landscapes, but Charlotte noticed they all had a similar feeling. Impressive, but somehow cold. Alexander's office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. But it was the man himself who captured her attention. He stood behind his desk, studying what appeared to be architectural plans, his sleeves rolled up and tie loosened. When he looked up and saw her, his entire face transformed. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi." They stood there smiling at each other like teenagers, until Alexander seemed to remember why she was there. "Right. The thing I wanted to show you." He came around the desk, and Charlotte caught that familiar scent of his cologne. "I couldn't sleep last night, so I started thinking about what you said, about reimagining the Sterling brand." He led her to a conference table covered with papers, photographs, and what looked like property reports. "I pulled information on all 5 expansion properties," Alexander explained. "I wanted to see them through your eyes, look for the stories we've been missing." Charlotte examined the materials, immediately drawn to the photographs. A historic mansion in Charleston, a cliffside property in Big Sur, a restored castle in Scotland, a beach resort in Thailand, and a mountain lodge in Switzerland. "These are incredible," she breathed. "Each one has such distinct character." "That's what I realized, too. We've been trying to impose a standard Sterling luxury model on properties that deserve their own unique approach." Charlotte picked up a photo of the Scottish castle. "This place has probably been standing for centuries. It has stories we can't even imagine." "Exactly. What if, instead of covering up that history, we celebrated it?" "You mean design around the existing character instead of despite it?" "What if each property told its own story while still maintaining Sterling standards?" Charlotte's excitement grew as she studied the materials. This could be revolutionary. People don't just want luxury anymore. They want meaning, connection. "Show me what you're thinking." For the next hour, Charlotte forgot about everything except the creative possibilities in front of her. She spread the photographs across the table, grouping them by themes and characteristics, explaining her vision for each property. "The Charleston mansion should feel like stepping into a beautiful Southern novel," she said, her hands moving as she spoke. "Rich colors, antique furniture mixed with modern comfort, gardens that make you want to sit and read poetry." And Scotland. Medieval romance meets modern luxury, tapestries and stone fireplaces, but also the best mattresses money can buy. Guests should feel like they're living in a fairy tale. Alexander watched her with intense focus, occasionally asking questions that showed he understood her vision completely. Charlotte had never worked with a client who grasped concepts so quickly or pushed her to think bigger. "This is ambitious," Alexander said when she finished presenting her initial ideas. "Too ambitious. Not ambitious enough." His smile was determined. "I want to do all of it. Every property, exactly as you've described." Charlotte's heart raced. "Alexander, this would be a massive undertaking. We're talking about complete renovations, custom furniture, artwork, landscaping. How long would it take?" "For all 5 properties? 2 years minimum, assuming we work on multiple locations simultaneously." "And you'd oversee everything personally?" "I'd want to, yes. This kind of project requires constant attention to detail." Alexander was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "Charlotte, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "Okay. Are you interested in this project because it's the opportunity of a lifetime, or because it means working with me?" Charlotte felt her cheeks warm. "That's not a fair question." "Why not?" "Because the honest answer is both, and that terrifies me." Alexander stepped closer, close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his gray eyes. "It terrifies me too. But I've spent my whole life making safe choices, building walls, keeping people at a distance. Last night was the first time in years I felt like myself." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I don't want to go back to safe." Charlotte's breath caught as he reached up to touch her cheek. "Alexander, I know we agreed to keep business and personal separate, but standing here with you, seeing your passion for this project, I realize they're connected. You're not just designing spaces, you're designing experiences that matter. That's who you are, both professionally and personally." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying yes to the project, all of it. And I'm saying I want to do it with you, not just as my designer, but as—" He paused, searching for the right words. "As what?" "As whatever we decide to become." Charlotte's heart hammered against her ribs. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd dreamed of, was being offered to her, along with something she'd never dared to dream of. "This could go very wrong," she whispered, "or it could go very right." Alexander's thumb traced along her cheekbone, and Charlotte felt herself leaning into his touch, despite every rational thought in her head. "We'd need ground rules," she said weakly. "Absolutely. And clear communication about expectations. Of course. And if the personal relationship doesn't work out, we finish the project professionally." "Agreed." Charlotte looked into his eyes and saw her own hopes and fears reflected there. This was the biggest risk she'd ever taken, personally and professionally. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay?" "Yes to the project. Yes to—" She gestured between them. "Yes to seeing what happens." Alexander's smile was brilliant as he leaned down and kissed her forehead gently. "Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for seeing something in me worth taking a chance on." As Charlotte gathered the project materials, her mind was already spinning with design possibilities and logistics. But underneath the professional excitement was something deeper. The recognition that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. Tonight's dinner would be their first real date. But this moment, standing in Alexander's office surrounded by the plans for their shared future, felt like the real beginning. Charlotte changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple black dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. Alexander had suggested a small Italian restaurant tucked away in the arts district, far from the corporate dining spots where they might be recognized. She arrived to find him already waiting at a corner table, looking impossibly handsome in dark jeans and a navy sweater. The sight of him in casual clothes somehow made him more attractive, more approachable. "You look beautiful," he said. standing to pull out her chair. "You look different." "Good. Different." No suit, no tie, no conference calls. Just Alexander. The restaurant was intimate and cozy, with dim lighting and the soft murmur of conversation from other diners. Charlotte felt herself relaxing for the first time all day. "I have to admit something," Alexander said after they'd ordered wine. "I'm nervous." "You're nervous? Yesterday you were completely confident." "Yesterday was unexpected. Tonight I have time to overthink everything." He smiled ruefully. "I keep worrying I'm going to say something that makes you realize what a terrible idea this is." Alexander Sterling is nervous about a date. If the business magazines could see you now. "Let's hope they can't. I have a reputation to maintain." Charlotte laughed, charmed by this more vulnerable side of him. What would they say? About the ruthless businessman who's afraid he'll scare off his interior designer? They'd probably suggest I fire you and find someone less distracting. "And would you?" Alexander's expression grew serious. "Never. Even if this doesn't work out romantically, I meant what I said about the project. You're brilliant at what you do, Charlotte. I want you to redesign every Sterling property whether you'll have dinner with me or not." The sincerity in his voice made Charlotte's chest warm. "That's good to know, because I have approximately 50 ideas for the Charleston property alone." "Tell me." For the next hour, Charlotte found herself describing her vision with the kind of passion she usually reserved for her closest friends. Alexander listened intently, asking thoughtful questions, and building on her ideas in ways that made her even more excited about the project. "You really love this," he observed, as she finished explaining her concept for transforming the castle's Great Hall. "I love creating spaces that move people. There's something magical about the moment, when a room comes together perfectly, when you can feel that it's exactly right." "Like this," Alexander said quietly. "Like what?" "This moment. Right here. Right now. It feels exactly right." Charlotte's breath caught as he reached across the table and took her hand. "Alexander, I know we're supposed to be figuring out if this is real, but I already know. At least, I know how I feel. How do you feel?" "Like I've been waiting my whole life for someone to get excited about Scottish castles and southern mansions, and look at me like I actually matter." Charlotte's heart squeezed. "You do matter. To Sterling Industries, sure. To shareholders and employees and business partners. But not as just me. You matter to me. As just you." Alexander's smile was soft and genuine. "Even though I got you locked in a sauna? Especially because you got me locked in a sauna." They laughed together, and Charlotte realized how easy this felt. Not like a first date with all its awkward uncertainty, but like coming home. "Can I ask you something?" Charlotte said as they shared tiramisu for dessert. "Anything. What happens next? I mean, practically speaking. We're about to embark on a 2-year project together. How do we navigate the personal side without compromising the professional side?" Alexander considered her question seriously. "Honestly? I don't know. I've never mixed business with pleasure before." "Never?" "Never. I've always kept those parts of my life completely separate." He met her eyes. "But then, I've never met anyone like you before. We'll have to be careful. Set boundaries. Communicate clearly. Make sure we're both comfortable with how things develop." "Agreed. And if at any point either of us feels like the personal relationship is interfering with the work, we reassess," Charlotte finished. "The project comes first." "The project comes first," Alexander confirmed, though something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced that would be as simple as it sounded. They walked slowly back to Charlotte's car, neither seeming eager for the evening to end. The night air was cool and crisp, and Charlotte pulled her wrap closer around her shoulders. "Cold?" Alexander asked, immediately shrugging out of his jacket. I'm fine, really. But he was already draping the jacket around her shoulders, his hands lingering for a moment longer than necessary. Charlotte caught his scent on the fabric and felt that familiar flutter in her stomach. Thank you. Keep it. You seem to be collecting my jackets. Charlotte laughed. I should probably return the one from yesterday. No rush. It looks better on you anyway. They reached her car, and Charlotte turned to face him, suddenly uncertain. How did you end a first date with someone you'd be working with for the next 2 years? Charlotte, Alexander said softly, stepping closer. Yes? I'd like to kiss you goodnight, but I want to make sure that's something you want too. Charlotte's heart raced as she looked up into his gray eyes. Yes, I want that too. Alexander cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone. Are you sure? Instead of answering, Charlotte rose on her toes and kissed him. The kiss was soft and sweet at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of moving too fast. But then Alexander's arms came around her, pulling her closer, and Charlotte felt herself melting into him. Everything else, the street, the cars, the rest of the world, faded away until there was nothing but the two of them and the perfect rightness of being in his arms. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Wow, Charlotte whispered. Yeah. Wow. Alexander rested his forehead against hers. So this is definitely real. Definitely real. They stood there holding each other for a long moment, and Charlotte marveled at how natural it felt to be close to him, like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. I should let you go, Alexander said reluctantly, even though I don't want to. I know. I have an early meeting tomorrow anyway. About the project? About rearranging my entire schedule for the next 2 years. Alexander smiled. No regrets? Charlotte looked at him, his tousled hair, his warm eyes, the gentle smile that made her feel like the most important person in the world. No regrets, she said firmly. As she drove home, Alexander's jacket wrapped around her, and the taste of his kiss still on her lips, Charlotte realized that everything in her life was about to change. The careful plans she'd made, the safe path she'd been following, all of it was being rewritten. And for the first time in her life, she couldn't wait to see what came next. 2 weeks later, Charlotte stood in the lobby of the Charleston mansion, watching workers carefully remove dust sheets from antique furniture that had been stored for decades. Afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating rooms that hadn't been properly lived in for years. The bones are incredible, she said into her phone, updating Alexander, who was in New York, meeting with architects for the Scotland property. But it's going to need more work than we initially thought. Good news or bad news? Both. The structural integrity is better than expected, but the electrical and plumbing systems need complete overhauls. Charlotte made notes on her tablet as she walked through the formal dining room. The good news is that we can hide most of the modern updates while preserving the historical character. What's your timeline looking like? If we start renovations next month, we could have the first phase completed by Christmas. But Alexander, you need to see this place in person. There are details here that don't show up in photographs. I'll fly down next week. Can you stay until then? Charlotte felt a familiar flutter at the prospect of seeing him again. They'd managed to maintain professional boundaries during their phone calls and video conferences, but the undercurrent of personal connection was always there. I can stay. I want to spend more time with the local craftspeople anyway. There's a furniture maker here who specializes in period reproductions. That would be perfect for the guest rooms. Good. Book us dinner reservations somewhere nice for next Thursday. Business dinner? Definitely business, Alexander said, but she could hear the smile in his voice. We have a lot to discuss. After ending the call, Charlotte spent the rest of the afternoon taking detailed measurements and photographs. The mansion was a treasure trove of original details, hand-carved moldings, original hardwood floors, fireplaces with intricate mantels. Her mind raced with possibilities for each room. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "How's Charleston? More importantly, how's the billionaire boyfriend situation?" Charlotte typed back while walking upstairs. "It's complicated. We're trying to keep things professional while working together." "And how's that going?" "Terribly. I miss him constantly, and we talk every day for business reasons." "Sounds like torture." "The sweetest torture imaginable." Charlotte was discovering that working with Alexander was both easier and harder than she'd expected. Easier because they understood each other's vision perfectly, communicating about design concepts with an intuitive connection that made every conversation productive. Harder because every professional interaction reminded her of their personal chemistry. Thursday arrived faster than expected. Charlotte had spent extra time choosing her outfit, a navy wrap dress that was professional but flattering, and made reservations at a restaurant overlooking the harbor. Alexander's rental car pulled up just as she finished her final walkthrough of the mansion's main floor. She watched through the window as he climbed out, looking effortlessly handsome in khakis and a white button-down shirt. When he spotted her through the glass, his face broke into a smile that made her heart skip. "Hi," he said, when she opened the front door. "Hi yourself. Ready for the grand tour?" For the next hour, Charlotte led Alexander through every room, explaining her vision and showing him the details that had captured her imagination. She watched his face as they moved through the spaces, noting how his expression grew more animated with each room. "This is incredible," he said, as they stood in what would become the library. "I can already picture guests curled up in here with books and wine." "Exactly. And wait until you see the garden room." Charlotte had saved the best for last, a glass-enclosed conservatory that overlooked the formal gardens. Afternoon light poured through the windows, casting intricate shadows on the stone floor. "Charlotte, this is perfect." Alexander turned in a slow circle, taking in every detail. "You've managed to honor the history while making it completely livable." "You really like it?" "I love it. Every single idea, every detail." He stepped closer, his expression growing more personal. "You're amazing at this. Thank you. That means everything coming from you." They stood there, looking at each other, the professional discussion fading into something more intimate. Charlotte was acutely aware of how close Alexander was standing, how the late afternoon light highlighted the gray in his eyes. "We should probably head to dinner," she said softly. "Probably." But neither of them moved. The air between them crackled with the tension they'd been carefully controlling for 2 weeks. "Charlotte," Alexander said quietly. "Yes?" "I've missed you." The simple honesty in his voice broke down her carefully maintained professional facade. "I've missed you too. This is harder than I thought it would be, talking to you every day but not being able to." He gestured helplessly. "I know. I keep wanting to share things with you that have nothing to do with work." "Like what?" "Like how I found this amazing antique shop yesterday and spent an hour imagining what pieces you'd like. Or how I keep stealing your jacket from the coat closet just because it smells like you." Alexander's eyes darkened. "Charlotte, I know. We agreed to keep things professional. Maybe we were naive to think we could." Charlotte's pulse quickened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we should stop pretending we can compartmentalize this." Alexander reached up to touch her cheek. "I'm saying I care about you too much to keep pretending I don't." "But the project will be incredible whether we're together or not. But I think it could be even better if we stop fighting what's between us." Charlotte leaned into his touch, her resolve crumbling. "You really think we can make this work?" "I think we're already making it work, We just haven't admitted it yet." Alexander leaned down and kissed her, soft and sweet, and full of 2 weeks' worth of suppressed longing. Charlotte melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "So much for professional boundaries," Charlotte whispered. "I never was very good at following rules." Charlotte laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "What do we do now? Now we go to dinner and stop pretending this is just business. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we start planning the most beautiful hotel renovation in history. Together." As they walked toward the door, Alexander's arm around her waist, Charlotte realized that sometimes the best plans were the ones you never saw coming. She'd thought she was just designing a hotel. Instead, she was designing a completely different life. 6 months later, Charlotte stood on the cliff overlooking the Big Sur property, watching the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and crimson. The renovation was ahead of schedule, and every detail was exceeding her wildest expectations. But it was the man standing beside her, his arm warm around her waist, that made the moment perfect. "Penny for your thoughts," Alexander said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Just thinking about how much has changed since that day we got locked in the sauna." "Best malfunction in the history of spa equipment," Charlotte laughed, leaning back against his chest. "I can't believe I nearly passed out from heat exhaustion during the most important meeting of my career. And I can't believe I fell in love with a woman while talking to her through a wall." The words hung in the air between them. It was the first time either had used the word love, though Charlotte had been feeling it for months. "Did you just say you love me?" she asked softly. Alexander turned her in his arms, his gray eyes serious. "I did. Is that okay?" Charlotte's heart soared as she reached up to cup his face. "It's more than okay. I love you too." Alexander's smile was brilliant as he lifted her off her feet and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that made her forget everything else existed. "I've been wanting to say that for months," he whispered against her lips. "Why didn't you?" "Because I was terrified you'd think it was too soon. Or that I was taking advantage of our working relationship, or that I was completely crazy. You are completely crazy. That's one of the things I love about you." They held each other as the sky darkened, stars beginning to appear overhead. Charlotte marveled at how natural this felt, how perfectly they fit together. "Alexander," she said after a while. "I need to tell you something. Anything." Charlotte took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I got an offer yesterday. A huge project in Dubai. 3 years. Complete design oversight for a luxury resort complex." She felt Alexander stiffen slightly. That's incredible, Charlotte. Exactly the kind of opportunity you deserve. It would mean leaving the Sterling project. When would you have to start?" "In 2 months." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his arms still around her, but his body tense. Charlotte waited, her heart hammering, needing to know his reaction. "You should take it," he said finally. "Just like that." "Charlotte, this is your career. This kind of opportunity doesn't come along often." His voice was carefully controlled. "I won't be the reason you don't reach your full potential." Charlotte pulled back to look at his face. Even in the dim light, she could see the pain he was trying to hide. "What if I don't want to take it?" "What do you mean?" "What if I've found something here that's more important than any project?" Alexander's eyes searched her face. "Charlotte, you can't make career decisions based on a relationship, especially not one that's only been serious for 6 months. Why not?" "Because what if it doesn't work out? What if you regret giving up that opportunity?" Charlotte felt a flash of hurt. "Is that what you think? That this won't work out?" I think I love you too much to let you sacrifice your dreams for me. And what if you're one of my dreams? Alexander cupped her face gently. Then I'll still be here when you get back. 3 years, Alexander. 3 years in Dubai while you're traveling between properties, building your empire. How do we make that work? We figure it out. We visit each other. We video call. We make it work because what we have is worth fighting for. Charlotte studied his expression, seeing the love and determination there, but also the fear. You really think I should take it? I think you'll regret it if you don't. And I think you're scared. Alexander's jaw tightened. Of what? Of admitting that you want me to stay. Of asking me to choose you over my career because you're afraid of how much power that gives me. Charlotte. It's okay to want me to stay, Alexander. It's okay to admit that this relationship means as much to you as your business does. Alexander pulled away slightly, running his hands through his hair. You don't understand. I've seen what happens when people give up opportunities for love. My mother turned down a job at the Met to stay home with my father. She regretted it for the rest of her life. I'm not your mother, and you're not your father. But what if you wake up in 5 years and resent me for being the reason you didn't take the biggest opportunity of your career? Charlotte felt her heart break a little at the vulnerability in his voice. And what if I wake up in 5 years and realize I gave up the love of my life for a job? They stared at each other in the moonlight, both afraid of making the wrong choice, both terrified of losing what they'd found. I need time to think, Charlotte said finally. Of course, this is a huge decision. Alexander, can I ask you something? Anything. If our situations were reversed, if you had to choose between Sterling Industries and me, what would you do? Alexander was quiet for so long, Charlotte thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I don't know, and that terrifies me. Charlotte nodded, understanding more than he realized. They were both scared of how much they'd come to mean to each other, both afraid of making the wrong choice. Let's go back to the hotel, she said softly. We both need to think. As they walked back along the cliff path, Charlotte's mind raced with possibilities and fears. She'd worked her entire career toward opportunities like Dubai, but she'd never expected to find someone like Alexander, someone who made her question everything she thought she wanted. The Dubai offer sat on her desk, back at the hotel, waiting for an answer. 3 years of incredible professional growth, international recognition, the chance to build her reputation on a global scale. But it would mean leaving Alexander, leaving the Sterling project, leaving the life they were building together. Charlotte looked at the man walking beside her, his hand warm in hers, and realized she had never faced a more difficult decision in her life. The question wasn't whether she loved him. She did, completely and irrevocably. The question was whether love was enough to build a life on, or whether she'd be giving up too much of herself in the process. As they reached the hotel, Charlotte knew she had 1 week to decide not just what she wanted, but who she wanted to become. Charlotte spent the next 3 days avoiding Alexander while she wrestled with her decision. She threw herself into work, finalizing details for the Swiss property and coordinating with contractors in Scotland, but her heart wasn't in it. Every design choice reminded her of conversations with Alexander. Every email about the project felt like a countdown to an ending she wasn't ready for. On Thursday morning, she found Alexander sitting on her hotel room's private balcony, 2 cups of coffee and a plate of pastries on the table between them. Jennifer told me you've been hiding from me, he said without looking up. I'm not hiding. I'm thinking. Those 2 things aren't mutually exclusive. Charlotte settled into the chair across from him, accepting the coffee gratefully. She'd barely slept in 3 days, and the California morning air was crisp enough to make her shiver. I've been thinking too, Alexander said. about what you said, about being scared. And you were right. I am terrified of asking you to stay, because I'm terrified of how much I need you. Charlotte's chest tightened at the raw honesty in his voice. I built my entire life around being self-sufficient, Alexander continued, not needing anyone, not depending on anyone. And then, you crashed into my world, and suddenly, I can't imagine doing any of this without you. Alexander, let me finish. He finally looked at her, his gray eyes intense. I've been thinking about what you asked me. If I had to choose between Sterling Industries and you, what would I do? Charlotte held her breath, waiting. I'd choose you, he said simply. Without hesitation, without regret. I'd choose you every time. Charlotte felt tears prick her eyes. You would? Charlotte, I spent 15 years building this company, but I'd give it all up tomorrow if it meant keeping you in my life. The business is successful, but it's not what makes me happy. You make me happy. But your legacy, everything you've worked for, means nothing without someone to share it with. Alexander reached across the table and took her hand. I don't want to be the reason you don't take the Dubai job if it's what you really want. But I also can't pretend I want you to go. Charlotte squeezed his hand, her heart racing. What are you asking me? I'm asking you to stay. Not because I think you should sacrifice your career, but because I think we could build something incredible together. Not just the Sterling project, but a life. A partnership. What kind of partnership? Alexander reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Charlotte's breath caught. The kind where you become my business partner and my life partner. He opened the box, revealing a stunning vintage ring with a center diamond, surrounded by smaller stones. The kind where we design hotels together and fight about paint colors and travel the world, creating beautiful spaces for people to fall in love in. Charlotte stared at the ring, her mind reeling. Alexander, are you? I'm proposing. To your heart and to your brilliant business mind. He slipped out of his chair and knelt beside her. Charlotte Williams, will you marry me? Will you stay and build this empire with me? Will you be my partner in everything? Charlotte felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she looked at the man she loved, offering her everything she'd ever dreamed of and things she'd never dared to imagine. What about Dubai? She whispered. We'll build something better than Dubai. We'll build it together. And if I get restless, if I want to take on projects outside Sterling Industries, then we figure out how to make that work. Charlotte, I'm not asking you to give up your dreams. I'm asking you to let me be part of them. Charlotte looked at the ring, then at Alexander's hopeful face, then out at the ocean stretching endlessly before them. She thought about the girl who'd dreamed of designing beautiful spaces, who'd worked so hard to prove herself in a competitive industry. That girl would have taken Dubai without hesitation. But the woman she'd become, the woman who'd found love in a locked sauna and partnership in unexpected places, wanted something different. Yes, she said softly. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stay. Yes to all of it. Alexander's smile was brilliant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like everything else about them. Really? He asked, pulling her into his arms. Really? Although I have some conditions. Anything. I want creative control over all design decisions, complete autonomy in hiring contractors, and choosing materials. Done. And I want my name on the company. Sterling Williams Hotels. Alexander laughed, spinning her around on the balcony. Sterling Williams it is. And I want a wedding in the Charleston mansion once the renovation is complete. Perfect. Anything else? Charlotte kissed him deeply, pouring all her love and excitement into the connection between them. Just promise me we'll never get bored. With you? Impossible. As they held each other on the balcony overlooking the Pacific, Charlotte realized she'd made the right choice. Dubai would have been an incredible opportunity, but this was an incredible life. She pulled out her phone and called the Dubai firm, declining their offer with grace and gratitude. Then she called Maya. "I'm engaged," she announced without preamble. "To the billionaire sauna guy. Tell me everything. We're partners now, in business and in life. We're going to build something amazing together. I'm so happy for you. When's the wedding?" Charlotte looked at Alexander, who was already on his phone with his assistant, presumably rearranging his schedule to start planning their life together. "Soon," she said. "Very soon." That evening, they celebrated with champagne and dinner at the Cliffside restaurant, where they'd had their first real conversation about the future. The ring caught the candlelight, sparkling like the stars reflected on the water below. "No regrets?" Alexander asked as they shared dessert. "Only one," Charlotte said. Alexander's face fell. "What?" "I regret that we didn't get locked in that sauna sooner." Alexander laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. "I love you, future Mrs. Sterling Williams." "I love you too, future Mr. Sterling Williams." "Oh, I'm hyphenating too?" "Equal partnership, remember?" "Equal partnership," Alexander agreed, kissing her hand. "In everything." As they walked back to the hotel under a canopy of stars, Charlotte marveled at how perfectly her life had fallen into place. She'd thought she was just designing spaces, but she'd ended up designing her entire future. And it was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. 1 year later, Charlotte stood in the grand foyer of the Charleston mansion, now fully restored to its former glory while boasting every modern luxury. Afternoon sunlight streamed through crystal chandeliers, casting rainbows across polished marble floors. The space buzzed with activity as wedding planners made final preparations for the ceremony that would take place in the garden in just 2 hours. "The flowers are perfect," Maya said, adjusting Charlotte's veil for the 10th time. "The dress is perfect. The venue is obviously perfect since you designed it. Are you nervous?" Charlotte looked at herself in the antique mirror that now graced the mansion's main hallway. Her wedding dress was vintage-inspired lace that complemented the house's classical architecture, and Alexander's grandmother's pearls caught the light at her throat. "Not nervous," Charlotte said, surprised to realize it was true. "Excited. Good. Because your billionaire is pacing around outside like a caged lion." "I think he's more nervous than you are." Through the window, Charlotte could see Alexander in the garden, devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, talking animatedly with his best man. Even from a distance, she could tell he was fidgeting with his cufflinks, something he only did when he was anxious. "He's probably second-guessing the whole thing," Charlotte said with a smile. "Are you kidding? That man looks at you like you hung the moon and invented electricity. He's not going anywhere." A soft knock interrupted them, and Alexander's sister Emily peeked around the door. "Charlotte, there's someone here to see you." "If it's Alexander, tell him he's not allowed to see me until the ceremony." "It's not Alexander. It's a woman from Dubai. She says she has a business proposition." Charlotte's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Today? On my wedding day?" Emily shrugged apologetically. "She says it's time-sensitive and that you'll want to hear this." Maya looked skeptical. "Who shows up to someone's wedding with a business proposition?" "Someone with very poor timing," Charlotte muttered, but curiosity got the better of her. "Send her in, but make it quick." The woman who entered was impeccably dressed and radiated the kind of confidence that came with serious money. "Ms. Williams, I apologize for the timing, but I'll be flying back to Dubai tonight and I had to speak with you. I'm sorry, but this really isn't a good time. I'm Amira Al-Rashid. I've been following your work on the Sterling properties. What you've accomplished here is extraordinary." Charlotte glanced at Maya, who was making subtle, hurry-up gestures. "Thank you." But I really need to. I want to offer you a partnership. Not employment, ownership. We're developing a chain of luxury eco-resorts across the Middle East and Mediterranean. Complete creative control, unlimited budget, and 50% ownership of the design firm. Charlotte felt her breath catch. The offer was staggering, exactly the kind of international recognition she'd dreamed of her entire career. That's incredibly generous. But as you can see, I'm getting married today, and my husband and I have a business together. Bring him. There's room for both of you in this venture. Maya's eyes widened, and Charlotte felt her mind spinning with possibilities. I'll need time to consider. Of course. But Charlotte, this opportunity won't wait indefinitely. The construction market in Dubai moves quickly. After Amira left, Charlotte sank into a chair, her mind reeling. Holy shit, Maya breathed. That's like winning the career lottery. I know. Are you going to tell Alexander? Charlotte looked out the window at her future husband, who was now arranging and rearranging the boutonnieres on the groomsmen's lapels. Not today. Today is about us, about this life we've built together. But you're interested. Of course I'm interested. It's everything I've worked toward. Charlotte stood and smoothed her dress. But it's also not going anywhere. Opportunities like this will come again. And if they don't? Charlotte met Maya's eyes in the mirror. Then I'll know I chose love over ambition, and I'll be okay with that. 20 minutes later, Charlotte walked down the garden path toward an altar draped in white roses and jasmine. The afternoon was perfect, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze that made the flowers dance. 50 of their closest friends and family members stood as she approached, but Charlotte only had eyes for Alexander. He stood waiting for her, with tears already shining in his gray eyes, his expression a mixture of love and wonder and gratitude. When she reached him, he whispered, "You look like a dream. A good dream or a scary dream. The best dream I've ever had." The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They'd written their own vows, and when it came time to speak, Charlotte's voice was steady and sure. "Alexander, a year and a half ago, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted from life. I had plans and goals and a very clear path to success. Then I got locked in a sauna with a stranger who turned out to be everything I didn't know I was looking for." Soft laughter rippled through the gathered guests. "You've taught me that the best plans are the ones you never see coming. That partnership isn't about giving up pieces of yourself, but about becoming more than you ever imagined you could be. I promise to design a beautiful life with you, to choose us every day, and to never take for granted the miracle of finding your perfect match in the most unexpected place." Alexander's vows were equally moving, speaking of partnership and dreams, and the courage to choose love even when it scared him. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was met with cheers and applause that echoed across the garden. The reception that followed was magical. They danced to jazz music under string lights as the sun set over the garden they'd designed together. Charlotte's dress swirled around her as Alexander spun her across the temporary dance floor, both of them laughing with pure joy. "Mrs. Sterling Williams," Alexander murmured against her ear during a slow song. "I like the sound of that. Any regrets yet?" Charlotte thought about Amira's offer, still tucked away in the back of her mind. "Ask me in 50 years. Deal." As the evening wound down and guests began to filter out, Charlotte and Alexander found themselves alone in the garden, where they'd first talked about their future. The house glowed behind them, every window lit, showcasing the beautiful spaces they'd created together. "So," Alexander said, pulling her close, "what's next for Sterling Williams Hotels?" "I have some ideas," Charlotte said with a smile. "I'm sure you do. Care to share?" Charlotte looked at her new husband, thinking about the partnership they'd built, the trust between them, the way they'd learned to dream together. How do you feel about expanding internationally? Alexander's eyebrows rose with interest. I'm listening. Good, because I have a story to tell you. As they walked back toward the house, Charlotte began to explain about Amira's visit. She watched Alexander's face as she spoke, seeing surprise give way to excitement, give way to something that looked like pride. You want to do it, he said when she finished. We want to do it. If we do this, we do it together. Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her fully. Charlotte, are you sure? This would be huge, complicated, demanding. It would also be incredible. Think about it, Alexander. Our designs, our vision, on a global scale. Beautiful resorts that tell stories, that connect people to places and cultures. Alexander's smile was slow and sure. When do we start? Charlotte laughed, throwing her arms around his neck. I love you. I love you too. Ready for the next adventure, Mrs. Sterling Williams? Bring it on, Mr. Sterling Williams. As they walked into their beautifully restored mansion, Charlotte realized that getting locked in that sauna had been the beginning of everything. Not just a love story, but a business partnership, a creative collaboration, and a shared vision for the future. She'd thought she was just designing spaces, but she'd ended up designing the most important thing of all, a life filled with love, adventure, and beautiful possibilities. 5 years later, Charlotte stood on the rooftop terrace of their latest property, a stunning eco-resort built into the cliffs of Santorini. The Mediterranean stretched endlessly before her, painted in shades of blue that would have been impossible to imagine if she hadn't seen them with her own eyes. The resort had just opened to its first guests, and every review praised not just the luxury, but the way the space made them feel connected to the landscape and culture. The Athens newspaper called it a masterpiece of sustainable luxury, Alexander said, joining her on the terrace with 2 glasses of champagne. And what did the guest feedback say? That it feels like coming home to a place they've never been before. Alexander handed her a glass, his smile proud. Your exact vision. Charlotte looked out at the resort spread below them, every detail a reflection of 5 years of collaboration and compromise and shared dreams. They'd built 12 properties now, each one unique to its location, each one telling its own story, while maintaining the Sterling Williams standard of excellence. Remember, when you thought I was crazy for wanting to expand internationally? Charlotte teased. I remember thinking you were brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. And now? Now I think you're even more brilliant and somehow more terrifying. Charlotte laughed, settling into Alexander's arms as the sun began to set over the Aegean. I got a call from Architectural Digest today. They want to do a feature on the company. Just the company? The company and the marriage. The power couple redefining luxury hospitality. Alexander groaned dramatically. Please tell me you said no to the personal stuff. I told them I'd think about it. Charlotte turned in his arms to face him. Would it be so terrible, letting people see behind the scenes? You mean letting them see that the cold, ruthless Alexander Sterling actually smiles? That he's completely wrapped around his wife's finger? Exactly that. Alexander considered for a moment, his gray eyes thoughtful. What do you think? Would it help the business? It might. People want authenticity now. They want to know the stories behind the brands they support. Then we do it. But I draw the line at posed photos in matching outfits. Deal. Although you'd look very handsome in a matching cashmere sweater. Charlotte. Kidding. Mostly. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple. This was Charlotte's favorite time of day at any of their properties, when the sun set and the lights came on, and the spaces they'd created began to glow with warmth and life. Alexander, she said after a while, Hmm? Do you ever think about that day in the sauna? Every time we open a new property, every time I see that look on a guest's face when they walk into one of our spaces for the first time. His arms tightened around her. Every time I wake up next to you and remember that I almost let you walk away. I was never going to walk away. You were considering Dubai pretty, seriously. I was considering a lot of things, but my heart had already decided. Alexander kissed the top of her head, his voice soft with memory. I was so scared that day you told me about the offer. Scared you'd realize you could do better than building hotels with some guy you'd known for 6 months. Best 6 months of my life. Mine too. Charlotte's phone buzzed with a text, and she glanced at the screen. Maya's here. She wants to know if we're ready for dinner. Their best friends had flown in for the resort's opening, along with Alexander's sister Emily and her family. It had become a tradition to celebrate each new property with the people who mattered most. 5 more minutes, Alexander said. I want to remember this moment. What about it? All of it. You in my arms, the sunset, the knowledge that we built something beautiful together. He paused, his voice growing more serious. Charlotte, I need to tell you something. That sounds ominous. It's not ominous. Well, you'll see. Alexander reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. I got this yesterday. Charlotte took the envelope, recognizing the logo of a prestigious international development firm. What is it? An offer. They want to buy Sterling Williams Hotels. All of it. Charlotte's breath caught. Buy us out completely? For enough money that we'd never have to work again if we didn't want to. Charlotte stared at the envelope, her mind racing. What did you tell them? I told them I'd discuss it with my partner and get back to them. And what are you thinking? Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I'm thinking we've accomplished everything we set out to do. We've proven that sustainable luxury can work, that people want authentic experiences, that good design can change how people feel about themselves and the world. But I'm also thinking I'm not ready to stop. Are you? Charlotte looked down at the resort spread below them, thinking about all the properties they'd created, all the guests whose lives they'd touched in small but meaningful ways. Then she thought about the projects still in development, the new locations they'd been scouting, the innovations they wanted to try. No, she said firmly, I'm not ready to stop. Alexander's smile was relieved and proud. Then we say no? We say no. This is just the beginning. Alexander took the envelope and tore it in half, letting the pieces flutter away on the evening breeze. Here's to the next 5 years, and the 5 years after that, and growing old together while arguing about thread counts and paint colors. Charlotte laughed, pulling him down for a kiss. I can't think of anything I'd rather do. As they walked back toward the resort, hand in hand, Charlotte marveled at how perfectly her life had turned out. She'd started as a young designer, hoping to impress one difficult client, and instead, she'd found a partner in every sense of the word. Their friends were waiting on the main terrace, champagne already flowing, and laughter carrying on the warm evening air. Maya raised her glass as Charlotte and Alexander approached. To Charlotte and Alexander, she announced, who proved that getting locked in a sauna together is the best foundation for both love and business. To Sterling Williams Hotels, Emily added, and to my brother, finally finding someone who can out-stubborn him. To the next adventure, Alexander said, his eyes meeting Charlotte's. To the next adventure, Charlotte agreed, clinking her glass against his. As the night deepened and the conversations grew more animated, Charlotte found herself thinking about that nervous young woman who'd walked into a luxury spa 18 months ago, determined to land the biggest contract of her career. She'd had no idea she was about to meet the love of her life, or that a simple malfunction would lead to building an empire together. Sometimes, the best things in life really did come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes getting stuck